The creator economy is one of the most talked about shifts in media today, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. My guest today is Monica Khan. She is the founder and CEO of Creator Revolution and has held senior roles across content, community, and partnership at companies like YouTube and Meta. Monica and I are both currently senior advisors with McKinsey & Company, which is actually how we met. Monica, I am so glad that we were able to make this conversation happen today.
Thank you so much for happening. Excited to have another senior advisor at McKinsey interview me today.
Brilliant. Now, let's start with something really foundational. When you use the term creator and the creator economy, how do you define it?
Yeah, when I think about creators, it's people who are creating content online. They're posting that in some sort of cadence, and they're also potentially monetizing that in some sort of cadence. There are so many different platforms that they could be uploading to. I think YouTube historically has been the place where creator monetization started and has been thriving, but now there are platforms like Substack and newsletter as a format that counts as content creation. So, that's how I define creator. When I think about creator economy, there's a whole ecosystem now that's formed around the activity of creating content because of that monetization potential that exists there. So there are the advertisers that want to be associated with creators, perhaps integrated in their content and sponsoring them in some way because they want to get in front of the people that creators have developed followings around. There are the platforms that have created these ecosystems where creators can post content and build a relationship, a parasocial relationship with people in a regular capacity. And then there's the agencies, right? The agencies that are also trying to help connect the dots between brands and platforms, brands and creators, and sort of, when I say agencies, I think of talent representation. I think of, the agencies that are doing the campaigns between creators and brands, and also management, like myself, who manages some creators, etc. So there's a whole and then not to mention all of these third-party companies beyond the platforms that are supporting creators in some sort of infrastructure capacity, from payments to, audience optimization. There is so much out there, actually, if you start to dig in, and there really isn't one single tool that solves it all. There is, as diverse as creators are, so are the services and sort of tools that exist in support of it. So yeah, that's the creator economy that has formed, which I've been in this, working with creators for 15 years. It really wasn't until maybe 6 years ago that I started hearing creator economy as a term and bringing this framing and legitimacy to this space where there's value exchange happening across so many different sides of the table.
So given that you've just listed so many different entities and types of entity, maybe it's easier to sort of say what is not creator economy. Where do you think about drawing the line? When does a platform or an app or a website not qualify as being part of that creator economy or a creator in that context?
Well, I think that that's a really good question. I haven't thought about it in that way. So, I think it's easier to use an example like Netflix, for example. I think that they have historically been a streaming platform, a digital media company, because the streaming platform has been online. And this is post DVD, right? Where the mail-in DVDs or whatnot. But I think up until recently that they've been doing some content acquisition with creators and co-creating exclusive content that they put behind the paywall for Netflix users to access. Until then, I don't know that I would even say they are really in the sort of creator economy, if you will, because sort of streaming, I don't put in that same bucket in terms of the business models that I associate with it. I know they've, as a brand, have been leaning into social media. They have their YouTube channel, they have their Instagram page, and leaning into marketing in a social first way. But when I think of creator economy, I think of business models that are different. And I think about, sort of an ownership question. How do you own your content, and how are you making that money? Are you sort of generating that through platforms, or are you actually going direct to consumer to generate that revenue? So that's kind of where I make the distinction.
Okay, I like it. Now, maybe let's go to how you're working with creators today. What's your role? What are the primary challenges or problems that you're helping to solve?
Yeah, so where I spend my most time are with the creators that I represent exclusively. So take Silicon Valley Girl, her name is Marina McGilko. She's been posting online, creating content for over 10 years. She got started on YouTube, and she's had her own sort of evolution of starting as a language learning creator and test prep, and then moving into really sort of building an audience around entrepreneurship, tech, and AI in the Bay Area. And she has a podcast now where she interviews top executive founders, specifically in the AI space. So how I help her and how we started working together, we were friends before we started working together, and she already had a very large team of producers and editors and other folks supporting her in the day-to-day sort of business of developing and posting content regularly. Where we decided to partner was sort of me helping her with her partnerships and growth in general. So certainly revenue generating partnerships, and a big part of that being her brand partnerships, but then also any kind of partnership that would expand her presence in some way, and sort of talking through how we could sort of partner on that. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. She's just one example. She's my biggest client, but there are other creators that I support as well, where I am sort of on a day-to-day basis engaging with brands, whether I'm pitching them in an outbound capacity or managing the inbox, receiving the inbound, and responding to those offers, and negotiating and structuring partnerships where creators will create content for a brand that they would post to their platform, or they wouldn't. In some cases, there are some user-generated content deals that we'll see. But in the spirit of being an advocate for that brand and getting paid in exchange for doing that. So that's how I spend most of my time. But because I've spent a lot of time, working at YouTube and Meta in the past, building product solutions for a lot of these incredible sort of use cases for creators, also just advising on their content strategy, on their platform strategy. I've made a lot of incredible, friends and colleagues along the way. How can I help sort of make connections and introductions as well throughout the journey and process? And it's been really anything and everything. It could be like the hottest ticket to the most exclusive AI dinner happening in San Francisco, to I'm going to be traveling internationally. Which airline can I get, free flights for? And so a lot of these things, it's not commissionable. So that's the other thing. Like I'm charging a commission for the work I do with creator clients that I represent exclusively. So there's always going to be things that aren't commissionable, but it's just part of getting to work with me, and that that is the benefit of working with me.
I hadn't actually intended to get to it until later in this discussion, but since we're right there in terms of how you make money and how creators make money, I think much of my audience is familiar with sort of digital advertising in terms of you've got content, there's going to be advertising either beside it or potentially interrupting it if it's a stream. For many creators, I imagine that's actually one of their smallest revenue streams associated with something like a Meta or a YouTube. They're probably making money in lots of different ways. If you could just talk us through the buckets of different ways that creators make money. And if you want to actually start with advertising, I said most people be familiar with it, but we may as well start there and you can move quickly.
Yeah, I think I'll start there because I started working at YouTube in 2014, and the primary revenue source at that time for creators was AdSense, right? And it was the early days of the YouTube Partner Program, where monetization was available to creators who passed a certain threshold. That's, but again, really reserved for YouTube long form creators, even today, right? Because as YouTube evolved and sort of added short form as a format to the platform, creators can monetize that, but it's definitely minuscule compared to what you can make on long form content. But a few years after I started YouTube, I think it's like 2016 maybe, was when we started to see brand partnerships as a revenue source, where brands were reaching out to creators, whether it be through agencies or directly, about the opportunity for a creator to create content for that brand, whether it was a dedicated video end to end, or it was some sort of integration that would sit in the long form video. That was a very new type of conversation where brands recognized the influence that creators had, specifically around reach, right? There definitely was this association around, the more followers you have, the better brand deals you will get. But then the short form revolution happened, where we're starting to see short form pop up on TikTok, and then Instagram followed through with Reels, and then YouTube soon added that. Short form is the lowest barrier to entry when it comes to online video content. Online video content, as you know, is really the best source of inventory when it comes to advertising, right? But with short form content, it's not long enough, right, for there to be meaningful platform revenue. So that's where then short form with the brand partnerships model actually became the catalyst for accelerating the brand partnerships revenue model, and really justifying for creators of like, oh wow, I can make a lot of money partnering with brands, and that being the core way creators were making money, because that was the easiest way to create content, and then starting to get brand deals into their DMs, right? Like in their inbox, like even before they even thought about how do I pitch myself, that's how active it was, that brands already start reaching out through various tools and mechanisms and whatnot. So those are the two primary ways, but I would say brand partnerships is the biggest revenue bucket, because not everyone has figured out long form content, right? And which is primarily through YouTube. Certainly there are other platforms now like Spotify where, you can get a rev share, I believe, and other places where you can make revenue through the platform, but not at the scale and depth that I know Facebook too, if you have longer form video, you can make money that way as well for certain creators. I think that the scale and the depth and sort of the breadth, like that's coming from YouTube. So that's why brand partnerships continues to be the biggest revenue stream. But, over time, we've also seen other models pop up, right? We've also seen like the Patreons of the world, where you can actually create your own sort of membership model, like charge a subscription, and people can pay for certain tiers and get access to certain benefits beyond what they get for free on YouTube or another, ad supported platform where they're getting content for free. So then we started to see kind of the Patreons pop up, very much also like very aligned with podcasts even today. And we've seen Patreon kind of explode. There was also the concept of live streaming, and people sort of sending money through the live stream, like tipping and things like that, that I know Twitch and YouTube were very kind of known for. And then of course the commerce piece of it, right? Where you can, pay creators for products and things like that, from merch or something more substantive. And then, whether it's on the platform or on their own website, right? Where they're now building a product line and making that available to extend their influence and really convert their influence into a much more meaningful margin for them that they don't get in the same way on YouTube. So this is the concept now of, I think it really started with the Patreons of the world, but like moving from a renting attention model to now owning your audience model, right? And this is where newsletters started to come into play, and other places where you own your data, right? You build your mailing list when you own your newsletter and things like that. And there are multiple ways through a newsletter that you can make money now. With Beehive, there is an ad-supported model. With Substack, you can actually charge also a subscription for that. And then, of course, this is now going back to, we were talking about Netflix earlier. We see the streaming platform seeing what's happening with the explosion of creators and the relationship and engagement they're building with followers, where should they be licensing content, acquiring content from creators because of the relationship they built with followers, such that if they put it behind the paywall, those people may come to buy that because that's how much of a fan they are, of that creator. So certainly we see Netflix dipping their toes with a couple top YouTubers, which I don't know that I ever imagined that would happen, but it is happening. We see Tubi going very aggressively to acquire creators. And I think this is just the beginning. And now we're starting to see companies like Fox said that they're investing in a whole slate of micro dramas, and Darm Man, one of the top YouTube creators, being the ones that they're partnering with. So all of a sudden streaming is now like a platform. And we've seen like this short form creator, Nabila Noor. She's kind of like a Martha Stewart South Asian creator. Short form, I would always say short form creators, like, I don't know that you could ever get a streaming deal. Long form content is where you actually sort of build the proof around what that could be. But she just got a streaming deal. So
and Monica, sorry, very tactically, where do you differentiate short versus long form? Is it 10 minutes, 5 minutes? Where's the break point?
That's a great point. I think there is an official definition. I would say it's like, gosh, I don't know, whatever the max is on TikTok or Instagram. Is it 5 minutes, maybe 3 to 5?
I don't know. I know YouTube Shorts is 3 minutes.
I should know this.
3 minutes.
Now
3 minutes for YouTube Shorts.
But like
okay.
Over 8 minutes, 10 minutes, this is now in the long form range. Yeah. And then if you can do 20 minutes plus is usually where we saw RPMs on YouTube be even better if you can have it be longer.
Okay. Help me think about scale. And there's probably a number of different dimensions to this. But you've got millions of people out there who are creating videos while they're working their real job. At what stage does someone start to break through and start to be like, okay, this can be a job for them and they can quit their day job? And obviously there's personal circumstance. I guess that even depends on, are you trying to have a general audience or be very specific to a niche? And then what stage they sort of break through and become a star. And frankly, someone like you might want to start working with them. So how do you think about the different tiers of this, size and scale of different creators?
Yeah, it's not intuitive. I think that if you asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have answered it differently. Like, I think I would have answered it the way that we saw initially brand partnerships favoring these creators who were seen as mega influencers, who had massive followings, like, over 500,000 followers kind of thing. The more followers you have, the more they'll get paid for the content they create because of the reach that they're going to get that content in front of, right? The size of the following. But I think what's really interesting now is that we see creators who we would call micro influencers, maybe like 100,000 followers to 1 million followers, actually being really attractive to specific brands because of the niche that they represent, right? Like, take some of these creators who are wholly focused on AI. All they do is test all these different tools and showcase use cases of how these AI tools are changing some workflow in their life. I'm sure you've seen it. Everybody's watching them right now, right? But some of these creators don't have the hugest following. They don't have 1 million followers plus or anything like that. Say they have a couple 100,000. But if you look at the engagement of their content, perhaps, how many comments are there with respect to the impressions, how frequently are they posting and how many views are happening on that? The engagement is really where you can kind of signal that there's, a lot of activity and conversion potential here, but it's also like in the quality of the comments and other metrics that brands can use to kind of sort of suss that out. But so these creators who have fallen this micro influencer bucket, some of them are still full-time at Google. They're still full-time at LinkedIn. And that is not something 5 years ago I saw happening, right? And these creators have created a whole other full-time, paycheck for, like, if you look at how much they're making on just the creator side, separate from what they make as a full-time employee, it's pretty impressive. So when do we see them actually decide to go full-time? To your question, this is now subjective to the person, right? And I think that there is no right answer. But there is somebody, for example, I know this woman who was working at Google as a data scientist. She started talking about data science and AI online. She did incredibly well and made more money than she was making at Google. I don't think it's like a for sure this happens, but there's a very good chance if you start making more money than your current job, you'll probably say, I think I'm going to double down on this thing. I also am having way more fun. I mean, I think quality of life, are you pursuing your passions? Are you designing your life the way you want to? Are you really enjoying that? That is real. And if you're able to build a sustainable business around what you love, I mean, I think that's real. So of course, if you make more money than you're real, great. I see people doing it even less than that because they see the momentum and they see a boundless potential that they don't see in their existing job, right? And they would rather work towards this boundless potential than performance reviews for a higher percentage of right.
As you know, I haven't worked in a corporation for a few years. There are things I really don't miss, either giving or receiving performance reviews. Yeah, there's a lot of those activities.
Yeah, so I think that it just really depends, and I do feel that even the slice that I'm talking about, it's like there are so many kinds of people and how they think about work and their approach to work. But I do think that there is this interesting dynamic between folks who I would have maybe thought would work at Google forever, but are, finding creator as a way to build a portfolio career, or maybe they do creator and another thing, right? So it's been interesting. So yeah, so there isn't a real answer, and it's also not associated with number of followers, and it's an income level that makes sense for that person. And do you have a partner, and what is your financial status, and all of those things play a role in that decision.
Let's talk platforms, and let's just focus on sort of one at a time, because I'm going to have a separate question around working across different platforms and apps. But in terms of the best, and the best is subjective, it's some function of rev share, the tools that are available to the creators. How do you think about the best? And I don't know if you want to call out the worst. Where are the best platforms right now?
Let's just focus on the best. Especially since I do like to see myself as a thought leader in this space. Probably better to just focus on the best. And I said this to you earlier. I think for as long as I can remember, I've answered it the same way. And I'm sure I'm biased, but it's YouTube, hands down. YouTube really set the stage for prioritizing monetization to creators, for acknowledging that the content that they were bringing to the platform was valuable, and that they were part of a flywheel that was important for, Google's continued success and durability, right? So I think making them a key part of the ecosystem, ensuring that they would continue to create, continue to make money, and that there was this like boundless potential for making money, a clear path for how to do that, I think was really, really important. And it continues to be a model that thrives today for Google, the way they've set that up. I also want to say with YouTube, and I was part of this in the early days, where they really approached the creator segment, creators as consumers of their platform, users of their platform, if you will, as in a talent capacity. They treated them like Hollywood treated celebrities and, actors and actresses and the people behind the scenes that get representation. They brought that kind of talent management perspective to it, where I think that really helped in the early days of relationship building and gaining sort of goodwill with them. And I think it's something that, has ebbed and flowed with different leadership as that's evolved throughout the company. But the YouTube creator program continues. I just saw that YouTube hosted events with their top creators. They know how important that is. They know how important it is to keep those people who are performing at their highest levels, representing YouTube in the best light in the market, to keep them happy. And that group is constantly changing, like constantly catering to this group. But they also know from a marketing standpoint that this is going to be captured and filmed and all of the things. And it's the best kind of marketing to show to the rest of the creator economy of like, hey, if you make it on YouTube, you could come to this event and we could support you in this capacity. And YouTube has also been amazing when it comes to, different kinds of monetization. Like they didn't have to, monetize shorts. That was a huge thing, but they did, right? And it's like, because they started monetizing, I feel like they've always gotten the flack of like not doing enough, but they are still so eons ahead of the others. Whereas the other platforms, that I won't name, have not monetized in the same way, and have instead leaned on sort of services and tools and things which are also helpful and great, or grants. You've heard of like, rewards and things like, which is also great. But I just love how YouTube partner program monetization is like inherent to just the business of creating. Like, that you can create content, post it, and you will make money off that. And it depends on how it performs. They have the metrics super clear.
Let me ask you a question. As someone who's not monetizing their YouTube or their LinkedIn or their anything else, but someone was texting with me today and they're like, where are you seeing more engagement? And I'm like, I actually see more engagement from the people I'm connected to on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn now has multiple different ways. Like I can create a carousel, I can upload documents, I can create posts. And I feel a more direct relationship with the audience because there's more comments. The comments are from real people. And so as you were talking, and I 100% agree, YouTube has created a fantastic ecosystem. One of my frustrations, though, is that you, as someone who's creating videos, you're limited in your way to engage with the end users. Do other people give you feedback like that or not?
Well, if you said what is my second favorite, I was going to say LinkedIn. So okay. We're on the same page there. And as someone who's now creating on LinkedIn and posting regularly, I couldn't agree with you more about the connection to the people that are on the platform in my network, and recognizing people in the comments and sort of, feeding into that back and forth in the comments and how valuable that is. Like, and for myself as an entrepreneur who doesn't have a water cooler, micro kitchen to go talk to people, like I love what LinkedIn has brought to the table. I think that when I'm asked about creator platform, what is the best one, I'm always going to favor the one that is holistically helping them build a durable business. And that's where YouTube is. And I know that LinkedIn is doing a lot behind the scenes to try to do some more monetization directly with creators on the platform, which is fantastic. And I've talked to folks behind the scenes that I know that they want to try some things. I know that also video is going to continue to be an area of opportunity on LinkedIn. And that's an area of cringe that I still have to get over, where I need to create video to actually monetize, which that's a separate topic. But I couldn't agree more with you when it comes to engagement and the opportunity to build a following in in a space where I feel comfortable. Like LinkedIn is my favorite. So
now let's talk about the cross-platform thing. Like there are people who are of the belief that there's a flywheel effect that occurs when some people can find your content on YouTube and LinkedIn and Instagram, and you need to be everywhere, and you need to have it in your RSS feed so it goes out to your podcast, and you need to be everywhere. Where an alternative approach is, no, I'm going to focus on one platform. I'm going to be expert in it. I'm going to build the majority of my following there. It seems like it's very different approaches, and maybe it's different depending on where you are in your career cycle as a sort of content creator. How do you think about those trade-offs of whether someone should focus on one platform or try to sort of cross-link across the platforms?
I mean, I do think when you're creating IP, you're creating a format that you want to lean into regularly. So say you mentioned podcasts. Say you have a podcast idea that you want to lean into. It's repeatable. You want to keep doing it. I do think you should have a platform that in your head that is like your primary platform, but you should, if you're going all in to make this a thing, you want this to be bigger than just posting videos to YouTube, say that's the platform, then in my opinion, you should already be building the spokes around the hub, right? So that Instagram and TikTok, or, you know, wherever you feel like you will find people that would connect with this content, that it's another place for cross promotion and driving to YouTube. We know that that is actually something that happens, and also just building new audiences on those platforms. So that's where like clipping becomes really important for that kind of long form content. I don't think you need to go to town with it where like you're a startup and you're like trying to like do all like eat, right? But I do think that there is like some sort of standard distribution plan you should have when you upload that single piece of content. That, okay, so I'm going to create some clips that I post on my short form. I've got something that I post in my stories. I've got my newsletter going where like it's, you know, it's running. If you didn't already have a newsletter and you're starting the podcast from scratch, I would not recommend that you go and start the newsletter. I would focus on the video and then think about how you're amplifying that video around. And then if you have any other presence already, like start leaning into that, right? So I guess that like, I wouldn't say you just stick to one. I do think that some level of cross posting, cross promotion to cultivate that cross promotion is necessary from the start.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the Yield Doctor podcast. And so normally nobody gets away without asking the revenue question. In this case, I'll amend it slightly. So it's either revenue or growing audience, because I think in this case, it may be just as relevant. But if you had to double a creator's revenue over the next 12 months, let's say a mid-sized creator, where would you tell them to focus first?
A mid-sized creator.
And they're trying to double their business over the next year.
And I've never worked with them before, correct?
Correct. Yeah. New client, maybe.
I bet that there are, you know, pockets of opportunity and optimization in their brand partnerships that they are not taking advantage of. So I will say, if they've already worked with management or representation, it's possible they've optimized these areas. But if they haven't, that is the obvious lane where I'm on track to more than double revenue for my creator management business for these reasons. And it's as simple as, you know, what are you charging? And how are you bundling formats and platforms? You know, how do you think about one-off versus multi-format, multi-integration? You know,
sorry, just describe those terms for people who aren't as familiar.
Yeah. So, you know, a creator will post content to YouTube, one long form format, or they may be posting short form content to Instagram and TikTok or LinkedIn and X and YouTube Shorts. And they may also have a newsletter with the long form. If it's a podcast, they also have an audio format. These are all surfaces that could be interesting to a brand to package into a partnership. So if this creator doesn't really have experience in brand partnerships, hasn't been really managed before, it's possible that they are just kind of doing a lot of one-offs, which is par for the course really in brand partnerships. And that's a problem, because so now, wearing my other hat as a consultant advisor, brands should be working with creators multiple times over. How much data can you get from one format on one platform to determine whether you should be working with them again in another capacity? So knowing that brands should be doing that, now I wear my manager hat, creators should be pushing back to say, I don't do one-off deals. However, I do package certain things as an entry point for beginning a partnership. How would you like to partner? This is, and tell me more about your goals. This is how I would design a partnership that makes sense given your goals, right? So having that back and forth and creative leveling up of how they think about entry points into partnering with brands and building long-term partnerships. You know, if they did a partnership across one piece of content, multiple, if it performed well, we have every reason to go back and renew it. And renewals don't happen. It's very transactional is what I feel, when that level of strategy and access to brands is not there, because they're creating content. They're like doing QA over here. Oh, they're building a product over here. They don't have time even to do outbound. So whatever comes in the inbox, they just, you know, handle it. But so even just looking at that as areas of opportunity, you will double your revenue.
What is one thing that you believe that is contrarian to what most other people in the creator economy would say that they believe?
It's I'll go back to the mega influencer concept, where I think that, it's a lot of these mega influencers like the Mr. Beast and the Dude Perfect. They have incredible reach. They have a track record where they've worked with the biggest and best brands, and they're hard to get a hold of. And I do think that there is this, I feel like there needs to be a term around this, and maybe there is a term and I don't know, but I think when brands get in touch maybe with the teams behind these incredible creators, and maybe there's like a little window of partnering with them, they almost get starry-eyed about it. And there's like, any number will make sense. But it's like the math isn't gonna math, right? Like you could like, so I think that there is a point where the math won't math. And it actually, like to what I was saying earlier, these micro influencers who don't have a million followers, but are like authorities on specific niches, right? And can really speak to a specific group of people, a specific type of workflow or routine or what have you, can be really powerful. But you need to work with multiple of them, but it can be very powerful if you work in that way with creators. And I would argue if you worked with 100 pre-vetted, targeted, micro influencer, different categories and niches, I bet they would work better than the one mega influencer.
Okay, given you've opened the door, I've got to ask you the question. Has anyone taken a run at trying to bundle up different types of micro influencers into a viable package, so that, because my guess or my understanding is that mostly this is situations where an advertiser is going to an influencer or creator and saying, I want to work with you. Is there currently a model where, as an advertiser, I could go to you and say, I want to buy 100 different micro influencers across the tech space right now, and I need them all to be vetted. I need them all to be quality. Does that exist, or is the industry not evolved to that yet?
No, it does exist.
Okay.
So I think the most sort of rudimentary is not the right word. The most basic one are these talent agencies and talent management companies, where they already represent rosters of creators. So in theory, when they're talking to some of these top brands, they'll want to pool these creators into bigger deals, right? And then once they win the deal, then allocate it across different creators. But that doesn't always work perfectly, by the way. And then managers and agents, they still have to negotiate with each creator of like, is this okay? Is this okay? They want it this way, but they want it here in a different way. Now we're seeing some platforms, for example, like there's this company that I love called Statosphere, which I've just gotten to know. And they have created a platform for short form content where certain brands may want to work with a certain category of influencers across a single brief, right? And maybe there's like a limited time of the brief is available and you need to deliver this piece of content, and very limited flexibility. Like it's like this or no, right? So if they do it that way, they can actually get many creators on board to deliver something in the same time frame and same kind of category. I think that's really interesting because and in some cases they've already negotiated like usage rights and things. Like in order to participate, I've already agreed to these things. So we're starting to see it already pre-vetted, to your point. So yes, pools of creators, you can negotiate with brands and have greater leverage, but it can get complicated. It depends on how pre-vetted and secured those, all those nuances are, because every creator is different in how they create content and all the things.
That is incredibly interesting. It's actually what I was wondering, if we'd got to sort of click to accept terms and conditions.
Yes, yes.
Monica, this has been an incredibly interesting conversation. As we wrap up, what is the best way for people to learn more about you and the work that you and your team are doing?
Yes, I think the best way is to follow me on LinkedIn, where I am posting regularly, at least 4 times a week during the week. And it's really about the creator economy, sometimes a little bit about my career journey, but mostly about the different hats that I wear in the space, and really wanting to make creators, my mission to claim their rightful place in media, and then for brands to fully recognize the ROI that creators can bring to the table for them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time, Monica.
Awesome. Thank you, James, for having me.